this year. This will be a farewell, and I kind of wanted to get more scared myself this evening, so while the No Sleep Reddit gives us some really well written stories, this evening we're going to be on the Let's Not Meet Reddit, which I think it's meant to be real, or at least seem more real, grounded in reality. But yeah, the whole idea is these are terrifyingly true stories, true encounters that actually happened, so we're going to whisper through some stories for hopefully about an hour. We'll see if I can make it through, as it is quite late. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into story number 1. So, this is one of the highest rated stories of this week. Stalker followed me from gym and I am terrified. I normally take a walk every Friday to attend my weekly Pilates class. It's a 15-minute power walk from my apartment in a relatively safe city from Eastern Europe. I've never ever felt unsafe in my city, and I wouldn't normally exercise caution when walking alone at night. Tonight, however, after the end of class, I began my usual walk back home, and 5 minutes in, and a lot of corner cutting and alley shortcuts, I notice this strange looking man still following me. The first glimpse I got of him at that point was a young man in his 20s, incel looking, hat on, shiny elegant shoes and a black coat. On a closer look, he had a link chain, the kind of chain you use in heavy transportation and to pull heavy loads, around his neck. I instantly got shivers down my spine and changed my pace of walking to very slowly, then very fast to check if he does too. He changed his speed as well, and I could see from the corner of my eye he was still behind me. He was also on the phone, and I got the feeling he was taking pictures of me. At this point I completely freaked out, but my first thought was that I was athletic enough to put up with his creep, and that I need to stay focused. I was on the main boulevard parallel from my apartment, and I decided to turn right in a very fast and abrupt way. He kept on walking, and I thought that I was just crazy and it was all in my head. But 2 minutes later he was still behind me. I must mention that there were people on the street at every corner, so even if he wanted to attempt something it would have been virtually impossible. When I reached my apartment, I entered the house very fast, checked if he wasn't behind me, and that was it. However, the scary part comes now. After an hour or so, my husband checked our building security camera and saw that as I rushed into the flat, this creep hid behind a car and stayed there for a good few minutes watching the building. Afterwards he approached the entrance and took a picture of the entrance, an address engraved on it. I am now scared he will start stalking me and my family. Any tips and advice is also appreciated. I mean, my number one thing is, if you really do think somebody's following you, I really wouldn't lead them to where you live. I would honestly go to a shop, which is what I did once before. My only encounter that was kind of scary happened once in my second year of uni. I was walking back from a lecture, and I don't know why this is turning into my story, but basically we lived in a really nice house, but it was kind of on like the cusp of a really nice part of Sheffield and a really quite bad part, and it was so much quicker to walk through the bad part. But anyway, I estate, but there was a load of flats and stuff. And I walked past, there was a guy on a bike, and I think he looked like a similar age to me, I think like early 20s. And he was like, sat on a bench with his bike. Anyway, I went past him, and I noticed he got on the bike and started going the same way as me, which I didn't think was too weird. But then after I took a few lefts and rights and whatnot, he was still sort of following me. So I deliberately went round this block, like in a circle, and he was still following me and getting like a little bit quicker, getting a little bit nearer. So I was shitting it a bit because I had like my MacBook and stuff from uni. But basically I got close to where my house was, and I just went in the corner shop. It wasn't really just a corner shop, it was quite like a large, like, independent store. So I just went in there, and I think I stayed in there for like 10-15 minutes. The guy like rode on, and then I basically, after that, when I thought he was gone, I just like paced it like to my house. Yeah, I wouldn't say I was like scared, because he didn't get close enough for it to be like, oh gosh, he's actually gonna like beat me up or rob me or whatever, but I was still like, oh shit, like something could go down here. So yeah, I just wouldn't have led this person to the building where you live. But yeah, some people react differently in those situations. So yeah, that was a pretty scary story, but there you go, you get a little bonus one from me. Let's move on to the next one. Story number 2/3 is called Ceiling Walker. So it's been about 10 years since this happened, but I still remember things pretty clearly. I should note that this is told from my perspective, and I wish I could get my mother's perspective on it as well. She just doesn't remember the events as well as I do. For context, I lived in a mid-sized city in the southern United States, where the main thing to do at the time was to go to the mall. Or the mall. Sure, we had movie theatres and a couple of bowling alleys, but besides that, there wasn't really much to the city. My mum worked at a department store located in the mall, and having nothing better to do, I would regularly go and sit in the break room while she worked. It gave me a reason to get out the house, and if I wanted to, I was allowed to walk around the mall or get something to snack on in the food court. Honestly though, I was shy and preferred just to stay cooped up in the break room, playing games on my Nintendo 3DS. Banger. My mum's co-workers were generally very sweet to me and frequently popped in to say hello or just to check on me during downtime. If I was lucky enough to go with my mum on weekends, I could usually convince her to pick up my friend. Brackets, we weren't actually dating, but since we were both girls, I didn't want that to get out. Going to the mall meant I was free from doing chores at home, and it was a cheap way to sneak a secret date in every now and then. My girlfriend, though, never really liked staying in the break room with me. She always wanted to walk around the mall. I should note that she really enjoyed taking walks, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to want to do so at the mall as well. I just didn't like walking as much as she did, so I tried to weasel my way out of it whenever I could. I could usually convince her just to walk over to a nearby store and look around, or to grab something from the food court rather than walking. But I noticed pretty quickly that she wasn't trying to actually get me to walk around. She just didn't want to be in the break room. Now my girlfriend was more perceptive to things than I was, and I assumed she just didn't like the ambience of the break room for some reason. For a little while I let it go, but eventually I got frustrated and asked directly what was really bothering her about the break room. I thought she was going to tell me it was too cramped or the lights randomly cutting off made her uneasy. The things that bothered me about it too. But no. What she told me was she heard things in the ceiling, like someone was walking around in there. I'd learned from my mother was a room in the ceiling, but it wasn't for walking around, it was for maintenance. Most of the stuff in there was wiring and insulation, but technically someone could go up there. So I told my girlfriend this and said it was likely an employee up there to fix stuff. She said that was fine, but she didn't really like it and still preferred walking around or sitting in the food court. I understood her discomfort and wanted to help, so I agreed. We had a really good relationship in the sense of communication, and though I got frustrated, I wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. Later that day, I mentioned what my girlfriend had told me and asked what they were fixing in the ceiling, though my mum just looked distressed and said they hadn't been up there fixing anything that day, but she wanted me to see something. My mum took me into the receiving room at the department store, which was just a room off in the back filled with boxes and random junk the store was going to put out for sale. The layout of this room, though, was sort of an L shape. One part of the L was used for receiving, but the other part was way into the ceiling. I should clarify for this next part that to get into the ceiling, the store would have to call for the mall's maintenance team. They didn't have a ladder or anything on hand to climb in there, as it would have been a safety hazard. The only thing that this particular area had was a hatch that led into the ceiling. That was it. So needless to say, I was horrified to see what appeared to be claw marks leading up the wall to the hatch. I still remember the way they looked. Brown gashes that had been dug into the concrete wall of the receiving room. I asked my mum if it was a prank, but she told me this wasn't the first time it had happened, and she had no way of knowing I would even know she would ask about it. According to her, these weird carvings had shown up several times over the course of a few months. Each time the store would call in the mall security and maintenance teams would clean the wall up, and then go into the ceiling to investigate. Nothing had ever come of their searches though, and they eventually gave up dealing with the marks. The only explanation mall security could give was that it was likely a homeless individual who had made their way into the ceiling by sheer willpower, and happened to be very good at hiding during the searches. I stopped staying at the mall with my mum after that, and any time I wanted my girlfriend to come over, we found somewhere else to go during the day. Sometimes she'd just come over to my house and we'd watch TV or whatever, but I didn't feel safe going back to the break room after that. I knew nothing had happened up until that point, but I just didn't want to risk it. So honestly, to whoever or whatever was walking around in the ceiling of my mum's workplace, let's not meet. I mean, it's probably just a raccoon, no, or like a possum or something. I don't really find that scary, because it's more than likely an animal. Yeah, surely it's more than likely an animal, rather than a... I mean, also they were never really in any danger, were they? So, ceiling walker made it sound like, I don't know, like it was going to be more of like a no-sleep story, but yeah, that one, meh. Who knows what it was, but it was probably a raccoon, to be honest, but yeah. Let's move on. Got a little short one here. But what interested me was the top comment of this has more likes than the actual story. So this story is titled, I Think I'm Being Stalked. Apologies. So recently I had a few encounters with the delivery guy. First was he asked me, are you, brackets my full name from, brackets my previous address, you moved her, all smiling creepily. I thought he was just a delivery guy that was trying to do small talk, so I brushed him off. I'm living alone, so I thought I was just being overthinking by getting creeped out. Then I realised after I thought about it that he was my neighbour in my previous address. He struck up a conversation with me, saying he knows one of my friends. I don't like talking to strangers, so I didn't talk with him long, but it stayed with me. Because I felt uncomfortable with him, I felt that he was dangerous. After that, I was going out, and I saw him again delivering to my neighbour, and I ignored him trying to walk by. He saw me and recognised me even if I was wearing a mask, and asked the same question again. After that, since I don't go out much, I don't see him as often. There was this one time he was standing in front of my neighbour's house, but I just walked by. Then I saw him in my Facebook friend requests, and I just ignored him again, but I was obviously creeped out, so I told my friend that he said he knew. At first, my friend said she doesn't know anyone with that name, but his last name made her recognise him as a son of a family friend. They never talked. His family didn't know he was working as a delivery guy, and he was laid off because he became obsessed with his boss, which was older than his mum. I also lost my keys, so I asked my landlord for replacement. I didn't think much of it until I got home to my door open. Oh, I got the chills. Obviously I was cautious, but there was no one at my apartment, so I sighed in relief, thinking maybe I left it open. I am night shift, so sometimes my mind is all over the place. Now that I'm thinking about it, I overlooked a lot of things, and I'm thinking of installing CCTV in front of my apartment. I'm still scared though, because he knows my address. Update, my friend told me to report him to the police, but I'm too scared because they might just let him go and he'll take revenge on me. She also told me he might be doing drugs as told by his family since he's acting suspicious. The most I can do right now is change my locks and install a CCTV in front. Wish me luck, guys. So this top comment says, get your locks changed. Full stop. Immediately. Full stop. Now. I'm going to be real with you. My childhood foster brother is now a convicted serial killer on death row. I'm going to remind you of something. I want you to really internalize it. He was arrested in 1996. His first kill was in 1993. He was a murderer for at least 3 years before he became a convicted serial killer. A lot can happen in a week. That was 3 years. Get those locks changed. I'm outright hoping to intimidate you into getting this done now. Just saying in case it wasn't obvious. I could give you a list of women killed by stalkers, and your key going missing is an overcharged blazing klaxon warning sign. Seriously, maybe it's nothing, but if it's nothing, changing your locks won't matter. If it is something, not changing them could be life or death. Do not wait. I feel like this is exactly the thing Ring doorbells were built for. I think also the bit that gets me is like, I think there's just something, even if it is you who has left the door open, there is something so creepy about coming back and it being open. Like the potential that there could be a stranger in your house is just horrific to me, and I think it scares me more now that I have my own place. Whereas before, like, I was one of 7 in a family, and I'm like, yeah, there's an intruder. It's very unlikely I'll get attacked first, so it's fine. That is, of course, a joke. Let's move on. Next up, we have a story called The Last Tram. The Last Tram. So, this happened years ago, when I was a dumb teen girl who loved walking the city alone after dark. This took place in Eastern Europe, in a city with a tramway system. One night I sat in a tram station waiting to catch the last one home. 3 trams stopped at this station, 2 of which went where I was going. Important info. over later. It was around 10 p.m, and as I sat there waiting, lost in thought, I barely registered a man quietly walking up and standing by the shelter. I thought nothing of it, just someone else waiting for the tram, until I started feeling weird. The streets were quiet and dark, and there was no one else in sight, just me and this guy. And I started wondering why he chose to stand this close to me when he had so much space to avoid dealing with people. I couldn't comprehend anyone wanting to socialise this late at night, given that I was not very social myself. So I glanced at him, trying not to overthink it. He was a bald-headed, beady-eyed giant, tall and built like a bear, big belly and big arms and legs. I was 5'2" and scrawny, but that wasn't what scared me. It's the fact he was staring right at me, unblinking and expressionless. Not even attempting to look away or act embarrassed at all, no. This guy wanted me to feel uncomfortable. I instantly felt weak and shaky, cold shivers down my spine. This was not normal, and I realised quickly I was not in a good situation. I couldn't miss the last tram. Walking home was out of the question, and my phone was almost dead. I was a shy kid and didn't have what it takes to scare this guy away. I knew that, but I had to at least try. I only managed to utter a small "hi," trying my best to startle him out of whatever he was thinking. But my attempt failed in the face of his silent, threatening aura. He kept staring, no sign of intent to reply. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh to break the mood, but I'm just picturing this massive bald bloke just locked in. I can't believe there's people like this in the world that can do it without laughing or whatever. Apologies, sorry. It's not even funny. He was enjoying this. Feeling the panic rising inside me, I told myself to stay calm and think rationally. Maybe he didn't hear me. Minutes passed. His stare continued to burn on my skin, and there was no tram in sight. Ignoring him didn't work, so I mustered the courage to speak once again, this time louder. "What do you want?" Stop staring. No answer, and he definitely heard me this time. I felt myself start to get angry. I didn't want to let this guy get to me anymore. I didn't want to continue to give him the satisfaction of watching me squirm nervously and pretend that his behaviour didn't bother me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to start thinking. I knew what I can't do. I can't fight him off if he makes a move, and there's nothing I can say or do that will get him to stop. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I knew they weren't good. If I tried to walk away, he would probably follow. I could run, but he would most likely catch up to me before I could tire him out, since his legs were much longer than mine. Even if I managed to somehow lose him, walking home through dark alleys past the junkies and gypsies that were always prowling about could land me in an even worse situation. I could pretend to call someone, but he might feel compelled to act much sooner if he felt threatened. So what can I do? The only thing I could realistically be able to do was to try and outsmart him somehow. So I started developing a few plans, depending on which tram showed up, trying to confirm whether he was just amusing himself and actually waiting for a tram too, or popped over for other more suspicious reasons, and whether I could get any help. I couldn't let him see where I lived, so if he followed me, I'd have to be prepared to employ whatever strategy available. And for that, I needed to stay rational and aware of my surroundings. While I was still thinking, the first tram showed up. It was one I could have taken home, but this one pulled into the desperately hoping it wasn't the last one to head home. He continued to watch, and I sensed that he was quite happy with how things were going. I put up with it for another 15 minutes, trying to focus on another plan of action. I could now pretend that I needed the other tram, the one going to a different area of the city, and just ride to the next station, getting off as soon as possible so I don't end up too far and miss the tram I need. This tram showed up next. With my heart in my throat, I boarded it and sat by the door. He got on it too, but sat himself in the back, pretty far from where I was. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking this might still go well. When the tram reached the next station, I got up and out, not looking back and hoping it was all over. But when I stepped on the pavement and watched the tram drive away, I couldn't see him in it. I turned my head slowly and was terrified to see him walking towards me. Looking slightly pissed off, he stopped just a few steps away and resumed staring, this time with a clear hint of malice still in silence. My vision blurred as I fall back tears of despair. He was not going to let me go. The helplessness I felt was unbearable, but I couldn't cry, I couldn't give up. I had to find a way, I had to get home tonight. The prospect of what might happen to me any time now if I didn't was becoming too real. My head was full of unanswered questions, regrets and horrible scenarios. I wanted so badly to not have to think anymore, to not have to fight back the tears and stay composed, but I knew this would be his cue to enact whatever messed up plan he had in mind, and I couldn't let that happen. Then I saw the final tram approach, the only one I could take now, and got on as quickly as my trembling legs would allow me to. When I was in, bright lights enveloping me, my mind snapped out of its nightmarish spiral of fear and allowed me a moment of clarity. I had 3 stops to figure this out. I sat down at the front and looked at the driver. He was a frail old man, blissfully unaware of my distress. Getting the driver's attention was a no-go. We passed one stop. There was no one else waiting to climb aboard. I turned around fully expecting to see that the psycho had followed me again. But I did not expect him to be sitting right behind me. He was not taking any chances. He was making sure I won't try anything like last time. I shot him a hateful glare and allowed my anger to overcome my fear. I stood up and purposefully walked over to another seat in the middle of the tram car. I wanted to make it clear I will not put up with this BS any longer. He got up too and slowly walked up to a spot 2 seats behind and diagonally from me, then sat down with the tiniest arrogant grin on his face. Already expecting it, I shot up and stood by the middle door instead, determined to keep him on his toes. If I stood right by the door, he won't have any idea which station I plan to get off at. He remained where he was this time, convinced that I was bluffing. After all, this was really the last tram. There was nothing else I could possibly do to escape now. He must have reckoned. So my defiance was just a funny act to him. This was my chance. I had to take the risk. It had to work. There were 3 doors on the tram, and they all opened and closed at the same time, and stayed open for around 5 seconds before closing again if no buttons were pressed or people detected on the threshold. The next stop, the only one left before mine, came into view. The tram slowed to a stop. The doors opened. I made no move. 5 long seconds passed. The door receipt. This is smart. I shut my eyes tightly and exhaled slowly while thanking the gods I didn't believe in for that button working, and wishing with all my might for him to have not seen me before I got back in. As I was waiting to hear his footsteps approaching, I pictured him frantically looking for me. Was he still on the tram? Face screwed up in anger, head turning like a fat, ugly meerkat? Or was he catching his breath on the pavement of the last station? Mad eye searching the darkness for me. As the tram continued its long, loud journey, banging and clanging in sync with my heartbeat, I dared smile to myself, imagining his face when he realised he messed up. And on my chest, I did my best to stealthily look around the corner, and found no one looking back. I stood up in excitement and threw myself at the foggy back window. There he was, standing alone and victimless on that slowly fading out of sight station, watching me leave him and his vile plans behind. Giving someone the middle finger never felt so good. I made it home and told no one my story for fear I'd be admonished for my naivety, but I was safe, I was proud of myself, and I learned a lesson. Creepy stranger, I hope the events of that day taught you not to underestimate girls, and prevented you becoming a criminal for the rest of your life. Let's never meet again. Yeah, that is like crazy terrifying. The fact she had the presence of mind to do that little manoeuvre is actually pretty crazy, and fair play. Because yeah, that sounded like it was going one way and it wasn't a good way, so well done. Got another nice short one here. Well, probably not nice, but so I'm from the UK, and way back in 2016, when the whole killer clown epidemic was huge, I was walking through the woods at around 10 PM alone in order to get to a party gathering that was happening in a secluded part of the forest. It was almost pitch black and I could barely see in front of me. Besides the flash of my phone, and everything seemed normal as I was walking to the party. I got to a long stretch of woods with no defined path, but it was the quickest way to the party, so I took it. As I got around midway through, I heard something to my left. I turned and saw a shadowy figure sat on a fallen log. I was understandably unnerved, but I couldn't make out of it if it was just shadows from the moonlight or if it was an actual person. I made the mistake of shining my phone light directly at it, and I was instantly terrified. Sat there alone in the middle of the woods was a largish man dressed as a clown with full face paint and sporting the creepiest smile imaginable. I tried to call 5 different people as I was passing him, and then I heard him get up behind me. I instantly started sprinting towards the end of the long stretch onto a path which had a barbed wire fence down the side of it. During the sprint I was pretending to be on the phone with one of my friends, and I could hear him running after me, but there was no chance in hell that I would be turning around to see if I was right. When I got to the path, I jumped over the fence as fast as I could and sliced my hands open as I did so. I then turned around and kept running backwards as I saw the clown stood behind the fence just staring at me and smiling. I didn't stop running until I got to the party, and I was scared for a very long time after this. You have to bear in mind there were so many rumours of people being killed by people dressed as clowns at the time, and while I will never know if the man had evil intentions or was just trying to scare me, it was extremely strange and scary to live through. So in conclusion, killer clown man from the woods, let's not meet. I mean, my main takeaway from this is it's literally unlocked a memory from my kind of childhood teenager, like mid-teens, whatever. And yeah, we had this clown epidemic, but I actually believe that it started as like a joke by a uni student at the town where I'm from. I believe it was a Uni of Northampton student. He was sort of doing it as like a bit of an experiment, but then it just caught on, and it sort of became a thing all over England, the UK, and also over America as well. I don't know if it actually did start in Northampton, but I remember reading an article about a Uni of Northampton student doing something to do with the clowns. But yeah, I remember it actually got really quite scary in Northampton. I remember seeing on Facebook, because it was when we all used Facebook back in the day, like people were sharing like someone dressed as a clown like banging on their window and like being at their door trying to like open the door and stuff, and this was all like legit, and there was loads of police and stuff. Like, thankfully I didn't actually live in Northampton, I just lived near it, but it was kind of a thing we'd all be talking about at school. But yeah, what a time to be alive. Next up, This Woman on the Train is the title of this story. This happened last week, and while she didn't seem malicious, the things she said were creepy. I, 19 years old and male, was going home from university, and to get home, I had to use the train. As I got on, a lot of the seats were occupied. In my country, the seats are built in a way so that 4 people can talk and sit in front of each other, and they're kind of close, perfect for talking, even with strangers, sadly. I see that there is a free space in front of this girl who is 1 or 2 years younger than me, but you can never know. I go there and asked if I could sit down. Of course, she replied, and looked at me in a strange, intense way. I pulled out my phone to distract myself from her. She also had a chocolate in her hand. That's going to be important for later. She asked me, "Where do you live?" And I was like, "Why do you have to know?" So she asked when I'm going to get off the train. I told her the place, and she told me that she's getting off the next one. She started singing, then said, "Oh, sometimes I sing, I'm a silly girl." Then did it again. Whenever she said something, she looked at me like she was waiting a response. So I replied it's okay to be silly, because I just didn't want to talk to her. Then she told me, "You're pretty." And when I asked what, she asked if I thought she was pretty. In my language, the second one is an extension of the first. Zeb, Fagi, turned to Shizeb Vagyok, so it seemed like she corrected herself. Then she asked if she had chocolate on her face. She did. She also offered me the chocolate in her hand, but I of course declined. She also told me about her piercing that came off, and she put it on the middle of the train. I told her that she should get it fixed where she got it, and she said, "In Germany. Will you go there with me?" But obviously I told her no. While she tried to put on her piercing back in, she told me that she's in love with me. Go on, lad. I told her that I have a girlfriend. In brackets I don't, but the university I attend has much prettier girls than her. Okay, bit below the belt, unnecessary. And that the pacing is too fast for me. And she told me that she will beat my girlfriend. She said, "I love you," and it escalated into, "I'll kidnap you and strip for me." She asked me if I'll go with her, and if she could go with me home. Then when the train arrived at my destination, she asked me, "Are you going, love?" I told her yes, and went on my way. Luckily, she didn't follow me home. She also asked me when we were going to meet again. Hopefully, never. To be honest, she's probably drunk or something, isn't she? Like, you just do sometimes get those weirdos on trains that, to be honest, just want a conversation conversation and don't get too much like attention and whatnot in their normal lives. So would she have been harmful? I mean, technically you'll never know, but like, just strikes me as kind of either drunk or smackhead or just plain weird, to be completely honest. But yeah, still weird though. I'll kidnap you and strip for me. It's not the greatest riz in the world I've ever seen, but she had a pop, didn't she? So fair play, fair play. This story is titled, I Still Wonder What Could Have Happened. In 2018, I lived with my partner and my German Shepherd in the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago. I was 33 years old and our apartment was a 4-floor walk-up unit. Very typical low-budget Chicago rental in a changing neighborhood. The layout of our building is going to matter to this story. Our building had a total of 12 units. Mine and the 3 below me had a shared front entrance, and the other 8 units were through a second entrance. All 12 apartments are connected back porches and stairs that shared a walkway to a rear gate which led to an alley. From the front stairwell there are windows on each landing to the back porches, so you can see the back door of my apartment when standing at the front door through that window. We had good relations with our neighbours, especially those that lived directly below us and shared our front door. This was the thing that saved all 3 of us, my partner, my dog and me. My partner was in a touring band at the time and would leave for weekends or weeks at a time, and it was a scary thing for me because I was essayed and stalked by an ex in my teens and 20s. I always worried something would tip him off and he'd start stalking me again, sorry. A little less than a month before a 2-week tour my partner had scheduled, I received a creepy Facebook message from that stalker ex from yet another new account. About a week after that, my car was broken into, the glove box emptied, things were thrown around, but the only thing that was taken was a bag of dog treats. I had about $20 in change in the compartment between the seats and they left the money. I was on high alert at that point and very scared about the time I'd be alone during the tour. My partner was kind of irritated with me and the situation and felt that it was too last minute to cancel, especially over what amounted to a bad feeling and a few isolated things that weren't direct threats. And truthfully, car break-ins are very common in Chicago. It's happened to me like 15 times and police usually do the reports over the phone and don't even come to the scene. What I found really strange was that the thief didn't take the money. There was a homeless man who had started camping on the boulevard nearby recently. So my partner left for his tour and I set up cameras and bought door braces for my front and back doors. I became completely nocturnal, unable to sleep at night. My poor dog developed diarrhea, maybe because she was picking up on my stress level. It meant that I was taking her down all 4 flights of stairs for her to go blast her bowels 6 or 7 times a night. Blast her bowels. What a phrase. I had the distinct, prickly, crawling sensation of being watched when I would take her out, but I couldn't tell what was genuine and what was my own fear and paranoia. Her diarrhea lasted an unusually long time, like 3 or 4 days. I was going in and out of the main door a lot, feeling very scared, and I noticed that some of my neighbours wouldn't pull the door all the way closed, so the lock engaged. I mentioned it to my downstairs neighbour one day, including that I was extra careful because of the stalker. He was supportive, said he'd mention it to the other neighbours if he saw them, and I did notice that the door was locked more frequently after that. My partner came home at about 11 AM on a Sunday morning. At about 8:30 AM that morning, my first floor neighbour's place was burgled. He was a metalhead dude who collected was in the same cabinet. They left all the expensive musical instruments and mixing equipment, left the drugs, but did take a set of keys. The keys were to the first floor apartment and a master key for the front door and back gate. My neighbours ran into each other right after the break-in, and the second floor neighbours said to go down no donut because she has a stalker. Go down no donut. So my metalhead neighbour came up to let me know what had happened. My partner had just gotten home from his door when he knocked at the front door. I jumped out of my skin but looked through the peephole, recognised him, and the three of us stood on the stairs at my front door while he told us about the break-in. We jabber-jawed for a while, about 15 to 20 minutes. While we were talking, we heard the front door open and close below us, but thought nothing of it. Then we saw a man climbing up my back porch steps to my back door through the window. There was no other apartment he could have been going to, and he had to walk past all 11 more accessible units on his way to mine. He was not my stalker. I didn't recognise him, but his image is burned in my mind. He was wearing flashy black and white high-top sneakers, not the one stolen from downstairs. His black coat was oversized and hanging off his shoulders. We locked eyes through the window and he froze halfway up the stairs to my back porch. He slowly took a cell phone and called someone as he slowly turned around halfway up the steps. He walked back down the stairs in artificially slow motion like he was pretending to be nonchalant, and then bolted into a sprint as soon as he hit the porch below mine. My neighbour ran downstairs and dialed 911. My partner and I ran through the apartment to the back porch and saw a sedan and a windowless van pull out from the sketchy building 2 doors down. Both cars floored it out the alley. We didn't get the plates, but the cops said it wouldn't have mattered. There wasn't any crime committed and nothing concrete to justify stopping them. They very condescendingly explained this to me as they took my statement later. My neighbour is the one who actually made the call and asked the police report. My partner and I were just considered witnesses. For a long time, the thing that scared me the most was the tool that my neighbour found when he went running downstairs. It was a 2x4 piece of wood, cut to about 2 feet, but about 6 inches of it had been made into a handle. It looked like a paddle, and for a long time I couldn't figure out what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was a ram for the door jamb and locks. When I looked at my door afterward, it looked like the frame had been repaired, like it had been broken open before. It seems like they used the one master key to place their ram, get somebody at the back door to catch me if I tried to run out that way, and somebody else was going to come back around and they'd break in my front door and go forward with whatever they had planned. When we caught them before they could catch me unaware, they seemed to have aborted the plan. I suspect they'd been watching me, especially while I was taking out my dog, and figured that I was alone. It was pure coincidence that my partner had gotten home 30 minutes before all of this. I felt that we all could have been horribly injured or worse had we been trapped inside, and they had gotten the jump on us. Nothing else ever came of it, except that my landlord refused to change the locks, but he did agree to let us out of our lease. I moved out of Chicago and have added a younger dog I'm training to do some bite work. My house is surrounded by cameras and floodlights and wingnut neighbours, so whoever was on my back porch, and whatever they had planned, let's not meet. I'm going to finish with this final story. My screaming may have saved my life. Some context first. This story took place in 2020 when I was 18 years old. I lived in a relatively safe neighbourhood, but my country does have a high crime rate in general, so take that with a pinch of salt. My dad had passed away earlier in the year, and I had no siblings, so my mum and I lived alone in our house. The COVID lockdowns were still in place, but as certain restrictions were lifted, people were starting to return to work. Between my house and the train tracks was a stretch of empty field. It became a safe, quiet space for me to escape to whenever I needed to get out of the house. I would normally sit there once a day for a cigarette or two, sometimes for a little picnic. My home situation was complicated to say the least, and due to the pandemic I had nowhere else to go. On this particular day, I went there for a few minutes to smoke, as always. I was about halfway through my cigarette when I noticed a young man walking along the train tracks on the other side of the field. He was barefoot and wearing dirty, worn-out clothes. He noticed me and made a hand gesture suggesting that he was asking for a smoke. I should have just left, but as a teenager I found it difficult to say no to people. I walked across the field and handed him a smoke. He took it from me and I immediately felt uneasy with the way he was looking at me. He asked me, "Do you live in that house over there?" and pointed at my house. I avoided answering the question and at this point realised that I needed to leave. I'd left from my front gate that day. For him to know where I lived, he must have watched me leave from the back gate before. I told him I needed to get going. He started insisting on giving me a hug to say thank you, and I declined several times. At this point, I turned around and started walking very quickly. I didn't get very far. He caught up to me and put his arm around my waist. I panicked, not knowing what to do. All I could think was that I needed to get away. As I tried to start running, he grabbed me from behind and started dragging me toward the row of houses, where the view from the road is completely blocked. The fences were high too, so no one could see the field from their backyards. We were completely isolated. I was kicking and struggling, desperate to get out of his grasp. He ended up throwing me on the ground with him on top of me, still holding on. In a split second, my life flashed before my eyes. That feeling that something terrible was about to happen came over me. I couldn't escape. He was too strong. My arms were trapped by his and he was holding me down so I couldn't kick him. I did the only thing left to do and I started screaming for help. Suddenly I was free. I could move. He had let go and jumped off of me. He ran away, my heart was still pounding. I was shaking, in shock from what had just happened. He disappeared into the industrial area on the other side of the train tracks. I immediately ran towards the road. As I reached it, I noticed it was empty. There were no cars parked in my neighbours' driveways. No one heard me screaming, and had he realised, that day could have had a far worse ending. He knew where I lived and I was terrified of him returning. For months I had panic attacks and nightmares and I could barely leave my house without breaking down. I moved away from there a year later, but I still sometimes get scared when I'm home alone or walking around town. Thankfully I never saw him again, and I hope that I never will. That one's pretty fucked, I can't lie. Excuse my French, but yeah, that's so bad. But yeah, sometimes the worst scenarios have the most simple solutions, really, and I guess you got very, very lucky, because there are some very scummy, horrific people out there in the world. So yeah, that is going to do it for this evening's video. I'm trying to think if I've got any other like scary stories. Thankfully I've never been burgled or anything. I'll tell you one time. So I sometimes Mum would already be back, having picked up my younger siblings from primary school, or sometimes I would get back first. So the front door was like slightly open, so I just assumed Mum had made it home before me. And I walked through the kitchen and looked out the window and saw that her car wasn't there. And I remember just going frozen. I was like, shit, there's someone in the house, blah blah blah. And then I heard footsteps walking round upstairs. So I was walking to I walked round back to the hallway to go out the front door when this man started stomping down the stairs, and I literally screamed. I must have been year 7 or year 8 or something, and I literally screamed. And it was the plumber. I'd completely forgotten that my mum had told me that the plumber was coming round to fix the toilet and the sink or something. And this poor man literally jumped out of his skin completely, and he was like, "Oh, you scared me. Oh, you really scared me." And he trundled out of the front door to go get something from his van. And he came back in, and I was just like, "I'm so sorry, I literally thought you were a murderer, gonna kill me." And he just started laughing. But yeah, that was probably the closest I've come to a home invasion type thing. But I did watch The Strangers when I was about 11 or 12, and that scarred me, so that kind of counts as well. But if anyone has any scary stories that they wish to share down below, then absolutely feel free. But hopefully you're too sleepy for that, or you're in a great state of relaxation after listening to some pretty horrendous experiences. But that's the beauty of these scary stories, relaxing but terrifying. And for this evening, we're going to leave it there, so thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you